Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here at BRITE. Again, as David said, this is about, I think, my third time here. And I love being here to talk about brands because I've got a really keen interest in brands. Actually, I think we all do. Obviously, everyone in this room does. I mean, if you think about it, we're surrounded by brands, you know, literally all the time. And I think that it sets an expectation where you actually think everything's a brand. There was a fantastic bit of research done by a guy called Richard Nisbett from the University of Michigan. And it was really the first serious research into how culture affects thinking. Now, as you can imagine, this is quite controversial stuff. So they stuck to quantitative studies and were very conservative about how they communicated the results. But it was some of the first reliable data. And so what they got is 50 graduate students from the University of Michigan. Now, half of those students were raised in the United States. The other half, even though those students there now, had been raised in China. So they participated in an experiment. What they found was that the American students immediately looked at the foreground, okay, at the focal object. So if it was a tiger in a forest, bang, straight onto the tiger. Now they did look a little bit at the surrounding environment, but not much at all. It was, for the remainder of the 3 seconds, it was always on the tiger. Now the Asian students, in contrast, what they did first was look at the context, right? Look at the complex environment in the background. Now again, they did see the main object, but it was never what they looked at most. So they couldn't believe the results when they saw it. And it suggests what I want to talk about today, which is a certain type of myopia that we get when we're focused on brand building and technology. If you think back to those images, you know, the tiger in Nisbett's image, it took up about 25% of the space. However, it captured 80% of the American student attention. And if you think about all Western art, this focal figure that is the center of attention is prevalent in all art. Right? Madonna and Child and a lot of the famous artists. If you look at Asian art, in contrast, it often stresses context and background. There's no one central foreground figure. Now, the reason how this relates to technology is whenever you hear somebody in the media talking about just one new technology or solution, right, you should feel very anxious. And this happens a lot. Obviously, we've seen this, right? At the time when the iPod was coming out, you know, people were saying this is going to be the savior of the media industry. This is often referred to as the Jesus tablet, as we've seen before. Now, is it too much of a stretch to suggest that what this is to technology is really the Madonna? It is the focal object that we are just obsessed with at the moment. Now, as a result, a lot of our brand building around these new technologies has taken on some pretty predictable trajectories. Okay, now you've all seen the way this works. This is, I'm not picking on GQ in particular, but a lot of the digital magazines are doing the same thing. It's like, hey, look, you can jump straight to the article from the contents page. Look, you don't have to hold it in portrait mode. You can also watch this horizontally. Okay, so additional features and more choices for how you read or relate to your brands. Now, we've seen this before. Okay, this line of thinking is very familiar to anyone who's come out of brand management and consumer packaging goods. Okay, now with more features, added features. This is the way we market toothpaste. Okay, it used to be toothpaste was just for cleaning teeth. Now it's for tartar control, whitening, etc. Or now with even more choices. Okay, this is multiplication of choice. This is often what's called augmentation. So multiplying features or multiplying choice. And we're pretty much thinking about our brands with this new technology in a similar way. We're giving consumers what they expect from what traditional brands are doing, but we're just using the technology to give them a little bit more. Okay? More choice, more features. And what happens once everybody starts doing that is nobody stands out. So when you're talking about disruptive innovation, the word technology is used a lot. I mean, this was Again, Clayton Christensen from Harvard wrote really the book on disruptive innovation, but it was very much around technology. So how big shifts in technology catch incumbents off guard, and they get supplanted basically by new technology. However, with disruptive innovation, and particularly when you're talking about brands, it's not about technology. It's really about a revolution in the way you think. Now, I'm not saying technology is not important. It is. What I am saying is that an obsessive focus on new technology is myopic. So the revolution, there is one going on, but it has very little to do with faster software and hardware. It's really a revolution in behaviour. The changes in consumer behaviour are staggering. And this is the context that I'm talking about, which we often miss because we're so focused on exactly what the new technology can do. I mean, Wired actually published a great article a year or two ago on what was called the MP3 effect. Really how consumer values and perceptions are changing. Some of the things we took for granted, okay, like sound quality was important, now we're finding that the values have changed. Sound quality in MP3s is far inferior to CDs, but they've taken off. Camera phones take much lower resolution than film, however, they took off. And finally, web stream videos, much poorer quality, but they've taken off. So it's this MP3 effect where the values are no longer just about high quality, they're more about speed and convenience. So some of these notions are so counterintuitive that people who haven't grown up in that internet generation need to use deliberate tools to start thinking differently about your brands and what you offer. Because if we can break free of the way we normally look at things, right, through our normal frame of reference, you can free yourself to start seeing things in a new way. Some of the brands you can see up there, okay, Red Bull, TiVo, the Saw franchise, the iPhone, Little Mismatched Socks, they've all done this. They've managed to break free of the conventional assumptions that have been made about their brand and their category for a long time and see something from a new perspective. So really, they were the three things I wanted to cover. We have to be careful because of really the cultural influence, right, that has influenced the way we think. It goes all the way back to the Greeks, to pay attention to the context, okay, to look for things that aren't obvious. Okay, in our culture, the obvious thing is in the foreground, so look at the context surrounding it. Get around this myopia of just focusing on what is the latest technology and what that can do for the brand. And really, disruptive innovation starts, it's not about changes in technology, it's about changing the way you think about a category. Now, if you think about it, this always happens to companies and brands when a competitor comes in and changes things up for them, right? Disrupts their positioning. All of a sudden, it forces you to think about the brand in a new way. It almost gives your brand permissions to go somewhere you didn't think it could go. Now, this is a Harvard law professor, and I'm really inspired by this quote. He said, "The task of the imagination is to do the work of crisis without crisis." So how can you adopt that same thinking before that crisis hits? How can you reinterpret, rethink your brand from a fundamental level before it's done for you by a competitor coming into the industry? So I really do think it comes down to this choice: imagination or crisis. Are you going to use your creativity and your imagination to do this, or are you going to wait till some shift in the broader economy forces you to change? Thanks very much.